Hey, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, and I'm the newsman, Sam Sachs. It's the Friday show. Happy 420 Eve to all those who celebrate. And remember, give the first edible time to work before you eat another one. Explosions rocked a number of Iranian cities overnight, and yet another attack by the Israeli military. This one is supposedly in retaliation for Iran's volley of missiles and drones into Israel last weekend, which was in retaliation against Israel for an unprecedented and illegal attack on its embassy in Syria. This marks yet another instance in which the Israeli government defied public requests from the Biden administration to de-escalate and not attack Iran. U.S. officials told news outlets that they were notified beforehand of the strikes, but did not, quote, greenlight them. But actually, they kind of did. I mean, they gave Israel the weapons and the defensive cover to carry out the attack, and so far have not threatened to withhold any of that stuff as Israel tries to provoke a larger war with Iran. Also, prior to the attacks, the U.S. government took a number of steps to sabotage de-escalation. It started in the U.S. House of Representatives, which passed a resolution condemning Iran. The bill stated that the House, quote, stands with Israel as it defends itself against Iran's attack and seeks to reestablish deterrence against Iran and its proxies, and fully supports Israel's right to respond to this aggression through military, diplomatic, economic, and other necessary means. So yeah, if I'm a member of Israel's freak war cabinet, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, that's a green light. And then later on Thursday, the U.S. was the lone veto at the UN Security Council to kill a measure that would have granted Palestinians member status at the UN. 12 countries supported the measure, 2 abstained. During negotiations with Turkey's foreign minister this week, Hamas officials had said they'd be willing to disband their military wing in exchange for statehood, which would effectively end the current war. So while the Biden White House claims it supports Palestinian statehood and wants to see the war on Gaza ended, it just shut down the one pathway that would have achieved both those aims. But wait, I'm receiving word. Yes, Biden is privately angered by all this. Bibi better watch out. The United States Senate is moving closer to authorizing expanded surveillance powers. The upper chamber advanced a bill Thursday night to reauthorize Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. Lawmakers will consider amendments today before taking a final vote on passage. Section 702 is a foreign intelligence authority, meaning it's supposed to be used to collect data belonging to people overseas. But it's controversial because during that overseas collection, spies also, incidentally, collect Americans' data, which is then stored in these massive databases. And the problem then becomes law enforcement agents can search those databases of Americans' communications without first having to obtain a warrant. Reformers promised that they'd add a warrant requirement before the program was reauthorized, but spy hawks in the House defeated an amendment to do that. Not only that, they also expanded the sorts of entities that can be compelled to turn over digital communications to U.S. spies. Here's what Senator Ron Wyden said in a statement this week about the House-passed reauthorization. Quote, It allows the government to force any American who installs, maintains, or repairs anything that transmits or stores communications to spy on the government's behalf. That means anyone with access to a server, a wire, a cable box, a Wi-Fi router, or a phone. Wyden called it, quote, one of the most dramatic and terrifying expansions of government surveillance authority in history. Senator Dick Durbin is pushing for a vote that would add a limited warrant requirement on Section 702 searches. The White House and intelligence agencies, however, are reportedly lobbying against it. The surveillance authority expires at midnight, and spyhawks in the Senate are using that looming deadline to discourage their colleagues from trying to amend the bill in any way to protect the privacy rights of Americans. Senator Mark Warner, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said in a floor speech, quote, I understand that some of my colleagues would like to amend the House-passed bill and continue the process of debate and negotiation. Listen, there are things I'd like to change in the House bill as well. The choice before us as we think about amendments, this is the case, is pass this bill or allow 702 to sunset. Well, that's an easy choice. Let it sunset. Next. In fact, the law actually doesn't fully sunset at midnight. As The Verge reported, the court that oversees FISA surveillance has already granted a 1-year extension of the authority as it applies to ongoing investigations. So there really isn't an emergency here at all. That's just a scare tactic to ram the bill through. And one final thing to note here, the House-passed reauthorization also contained a provision that protects members of Congress from warrantless surveillance. It stipulates that they be notified before the feds conduct any Section 702 searches for their communications. Of course, that same courtesy is not extended to the rest of us. Voting will wrap up this evening at the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where 4,000 workers are seeking to unionize with the United Auto Workers. Results will be certified shortly after. We'll dig into them when we return next week. Fingers crossed, though, that we see an historic win for working people. Meanwhile, auto workers at a Mercedes-Benz plant in Vance, Alabama, where a supermajority have signed cards to join the UAW, just got their date for a union election. The NLRB set it for next month, May 13th through 17th. Exciting stuff happening at Shawn Fain's UAW. Now, as much as I'd like to keep it positive and have zero interest to pit unions against each other, I do have a bone to pick with the president of the Teamsters, Sean O'Brien. Because while the UAW is making historic gains in a campaign to organize auto workers, the Teamsters Union is diverting resources that should go toward organizing new workers to instead help Republicans win elections. Axios reported this week that the union made a $5,000 donation to Senator Josh Hawley's re-election campaign. This is on top of the $45,000 the union gave to the Republican National Committee in January, and Teamsters President Sean O'Brien's recent friendly meeting with Donald Trump. As Axios reported, quote, it's the latest indication that one of the country's biggest and most powerful labor unions, which has yet to endorse in the presidential election, is willing to back Republicans who share its priorities. Not entirely sure what those priorities are, given that Hawley is a religious fascist who wants to subjugate women, inflame violence against minorities and LGBTQ individuals, push the U.S. into a great war against China, and, most importantly to the union, is a stooge to capitalist interest who opposes raising the minimum wage, Medicare for all, and free college. But like all clever fascists, Hawley does pay the occasional lip service to workers and did attend some photo ops, like when he stopped by a Teamsters picket in St. Louis last month and when he voted to provide paid sick leave to workers. But in an opinion piece in the Kansas City Star, former Teamsters member Jim Cabell wrote of Hawley, quote, he voted to remove prevailing wage protections in the first major Davis-Bacon vote in more than a decade. He voted against bipartisan legislation to create union jobs in Missouri, against raising the minimum wage, against workplace protections for pregnant workers, and while he meekly pretends to accept the will of Missouri voters on right to work, he refuses to prove it by co-sponsoring the Protecting the Right to Organize, or PRO Act, inexplicably claiming that it would hurt workers more than it helps. That last bit there referred to Hawley's prior support for right to work laws, which devastate union membership and treasuries. Hawley once tweeted, quote, "Time for an end to union-backed candidates in the GOP." It was only after voters repealed the bill, the right to work bill, that he stopped cheerleading for it. Hawley's opponent in this race is Democrat Lucas Kuntz, who is backed by a number of labor organizations. And look, I totally understand why labor unions might be tired of lining up behind Democrats who only end up being disappointments. And in fact, I've encouraged more unions to withhold their support from Democrats until the party is actually able to deliver something of value. But thinking that Republicans might be class allies is just total bullshit. Like, what the hell are you thinking, Sean O'Brien? Josh Hawley has a 96% approval score from the far-right free marketeers at the Heritage Foundation. There is zero justification for the Teamsters to be spending money to get him reelected, to keep in place another reliable conservative vote against the PRO Act. You know, I'm recalling that time that we defended O'Brien when Republican Senator Markwayne Mullin tried to fight him during a Senate hearing. Mullin sucks and is an enemy to the working class, but I do have to say now, he may have actually had a point when he wanted to punch Sean O'Brien in the face. Come on, Sean. Do better. You're embarrassing yourself. Everyone knows we can't enjoy the weekend without first shaming a rich dick, so let's get to it. Thanks for the nominations on social media. Arona and Michael coming through and nominating all the damn landlords. Thank you. We got a nomination here for Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav. Not for anything in particular, just a reminder that he sucks and screws over artists. Harry nominated executives at Boeing for their profit-seeking death drive. The Wolf nominated Nancy Pelosi, who's getting ready to go on a tour to promote her new book. I won't be reading it. And here's a nomination for BP CEO Murray Auchincloss, because oil oligarchs are always deserving of a nomination. Again, thank you all. But in the end, I couldn't ignore events that went down Thursday that heavily affected today's proceedings. And so, this week's Rich Dick is Columbia University President Minouche Shafik. Here's a question to ponder this morning. If you use your power to silence anti-genocide protests, does that make you pro-genocide? Perhaps that's something President Shafik should be asking herself. Thanks to Nora on Twitter for the nomination. For the first time in decades, Shafik had the school dispatch the NYPD to clear a campus protest and arrest student demonstrators. Now, I'm not sure just how wealthy Shafik is. I mean, she probably pulls in a couple $1 million a year salary as president of the Ivy League school, which would qualify her here. Either way, calling the cops on protesters is always a rich dick move. Here's how it all went down. On Wednesday morning, students began an occupation of the university's South Lawn, demanding that it divest from companies that support Israeli apartheid and genocide. The Gaza Solidarity Encampment, as it was called, was organized by a coalition of student-led groups, Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace, and Columbia University Apartheid Divest. Now, as that occupation was initiated on Wednesday morning, Shafik was actually in Washington, D.C., testifying before Congress in the latest show hearing about so-called rising anti-Semitism on college campuses, by which lawmakers actually mean Palestinian solidarity and anti-genocide protests, which aren't anti-Semitic at all. But Shafik played her role validating lawmakers' concerns and distracting from the ongoing genocide in Gaza and the very real crackdown that's happening right now against protesters who are trying to stop it. But when it was Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's turn to speak, Shafik got exposed.
Have you seen anti-Muslim protests on campus?
I have seen, we have had pro-Israeli demonstrations on campus.
No.
But
just
not,
a protest that was
not,
against Muslims.
No, I have
you
not
seen one
that.
against Arabs?
No, I have not.
Have you seen one against Palestinians?
No, I have not.
Have you seen one against Jewish people? Have you seen a protest saying we are against Jewish people?
No, I have seen.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. There has been a rise in targeting and harassment against anti-war protesters because it's been pro-war and anti-war protesters is what it seems like, correct?
Correct. There has been.
Okay, thank you. Activists on campus, including Jewish students, Black and Brown, Arab and Muslim students. How many of the organizations that were canceled in Colombia involved Jewish students?
One of the organizations is called Jewish Voices for Peace.
Yes. And it encompassed of Jewish students?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so to recap there, Shafik admitted that she's actually never seen anti-Jewish demonstrations on campus. She admitted that the debate on campus is not about religion, but about the war in Gaza. And she admitted that it was the university that actually silenced Jews, suspending the Jewish group Jewish Voice for Peace for so-called unauthorized protests. So, what the hell are we even doing here? I mean, unless we want to have a hearing on why it is that pro-Palestinian voices are being suppressed on campuses, but I doubt most people in the room want that, especially members of Congress. No, they're too busy fueling all this shit, passing for like the 47th goddamn time a bill declaring that if you're against Israel, then you're basically Hitler. Anyway, back to this week's Rich Dick. One day after that grilling of Shafik, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's daughter was suspended from Barnard College, an affiliate of Columbia. Isra Hirsi was participating in the Gaza Solidarity Campus protest at Columbia and was one of 3 Barnard students who were told that they were suspended over it. She told The Intercept she believed it was retaliation. Quote, "I think that the line of questioning which my mother asked was definitely a pressure for Columbia University." And as the NYPD moved in to break up the occupation on Thursday, President Shafik sent a press release claiming that she had to take a, quote, extraordinary step because these are extraordinary circumstances. She also claimed that the encampment, quote, severely disrupts campus life and creates a harassing and intimidating environment for many of our students. No, actually, that's what calling the NYPD creates. I believe you're confused, Madam President. Armor-clad cops swept into the encampment, arrested busloads of students, more than 100 of them, including legal observers, and then university workers came in and trashed the tents. This all went down at the same school where in 1968 demonstrators took over and occupied 5 campus buildings and took a dean hostage for more than a week to protest the Vietnam War. Fast forward to today, and a protest that involved just a few tents on the lawn was crushed in less than 2 days. New York Civil Liberties Union condemned the police action, saying, quote, "Columbia's move to send in police so quickly after these demonstrations began chills student expression, marks a significant departure from past practice, and raises questions about the university's disparate treatment of students based on their views. It also risks the well-being of students because the NYPD deployed its Strategic Response Group, a unit that has a history of escalation and violence." The group added, quote, "Coming as it does amid heavy-handed pressure from Congress to clamp down on student protests that criticizes Israel, Columbia's excessive response raises further concerns about its commitment to free expression." Yeah, it's all very upsetting and troubling, but it's a pattern at Columbia now. Shafik has overseen several other attacks on the free speech rights of Palestine Solidarity protesters, including an incident in January when student demonstrators were assaulted with some sort of chemical spray. Look what you've done to the place, Madam President. You should fucking resign, you rich dick. All right, friends, the show ends with a sunrise from Tennessee. It was sent in by Audrey on land that belonged to the Shawnee and Cherokee people. Enjoy. Thank you, Audrey. Show's over. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV, subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and follow us on social media. One day capitalism will fall. Till then, we'll be right here. See you next week.